was an idea to have a tram or a train to take people and show them some highlights in the natural area. And so it made perfect sense to look into having a train, a replica of a train here. Since Las Vegas in its birth is a railroad town, it just made perfect sense to extend that idea to our programming here and have a train taking people to parts of the natural area here in the Springs Preserve.
This ride through the wilder side of the property is done in style because of the attention we paid to recreating the colorful and emblematic details of rail's legacy in Las Vegas.
The San Pedro, Los Angeles and Salt Lake Railroad was the railroad that came through Las Vegas and helped start the town. And so we were looking to try to provide some replicas of the logos, of the lettering, of the insignia for the San Pedro, Los Angeles and Salt Lake Railroad. So on our train it says SPLA and SL on the side of it, which was the logo for the San Pedro Railroad. And we actually did research. We contacted the Nevada State Railroad Museum, and we were actually provided with scans of paint chips, of the paint schedules from the Union Pacific Railroad at the time. So the colors that you see on our train, we tried to match as closely as possible to those paint chips, those historical paint chips and historical colors that were provided to us by those museums.
It sounds as good as it looks with all the bells and whistles, along with an audio tour that will help passengers understand the historical importance of the route.
You'll hear a lot about history. We outline the history of the Paiute, the Patayan, the other Native Americans that lived here at the Springs Preserve and in Las Vegas at the time. We also talk about the history of water procurement. We highlight the water well derricks and some of the other water facilities, early historic water facilities that we have on the site here.
Because it was the railroad that took advantage of and altered forever the preserve's once abundant springs.
The railroad company at the time purchased this land here. This was their property, and they wanted it specifically for the water for their locomotives, to be able to run their locomotives. Now, as an adjunct to that, they needed water for the town. They needed water for the workers in the town, since this was the main division point between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. So they did quite a bit of improvement work on the springs, encasing the springs, hardening the springs, covering them, putting in the redwood pipes that led to town from these springs, through these redwood pipes.
But when the needs of a thirsty town exceeded these resources, all that was left behind were reminders of a water supply that was too quickly drained dry.
As you ride the train, you'll see quite a bit of our historic water procurement facilities on site. And the one that always grabs people's attention is the water well derrick for well number 5. This is a large water well derrick that you can see from the highway.
You'll also get glimpses of our efforts to refill the Las Vegas Creek and recreate a traditional gathering place beside its banks.
People would come out to the springs, enjoy the creek, enjoy the shade next to the creek, and congregate and gather. And so we're hoping that picnic area along the train route will be something that people will be able to enjoy.
Just as they'll be able to appreciate our progress in reconstructing the early Las Vegas town site surrounding the original railroad cottages we've already restored to their former hominess.
So phase 1 of the cottages area was the actual restoration and rehabilitation of these Las Vegas railroad cottages built by the railroad in 1910. And so that phase 1 part of the project is completed, and the results are fantastic. And that's going to be a fantastic stopping point or origination point for the train and for early Las Vegas and us telling the story of what Las Vegas was like before it grew into what it is now.
So it's the perfect terminal point for a round-trip tour through the preserve's frontier, which will leave riders with a more complete understanding of rail's role in an ancient yet always changing landscape.
We have the entire timeline of Las Vegas here now, with the cottages, with the railroad, with the train, and what a fantastic resource, what a fantastic opportunity for people to come out and learn and understand where they are and what it's about.